There's not a lot to say about Etherfields that hasn't already been said. If you love this game, there are reviews for you. If you hate this game, there are reviews for you. If you're smack dab in the middle, well then this review might just be the one for you. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and I planned on reviewing Etherfields before I started to watch Shut Up and Sit Down's review of the game. I started watching that, and then I realized, well, I don't really need to review this game because they're saying everything I'm feeling, and they also clearly like the game. But they didn't. They liked the game past tense, but they moved on from it, and that's not the position that I ended up in. You see, every single criticism that I have heard from this game, heard about this game, from those that have liked it, from those that have not liked it, I have agreed with basically every single one of them. The net difference, though, is that Etherfields is a game that is staying in my collection, and I consistently and continuously look forward to diving back into the next dream that this game presents. And so this review is going to be a bit out of alignment with my usual format, because usually I talk about a game, then what I liked, didn't like, and what I can see others not liking. But I'm going to switch up that order a bit because I think the context matters a lot in this game. And before we get into that, in case you are not already familiar with all of that, well, to begin with, go ahead and watch Shut Up and Sit Down's review. It's 24 minutes-ish or something like that mostly aligns with the negatives that I have for this game and will give you an excellent perspective of how I feel, mostly, about Etherfields. And Etherfields is going to be a dream-crawling sequence game, a game that presents narrative dreams one at a time in this kind of escape room mode, this journey you go through, every different dream being different in its presentation. And it's going to go through a few core sequences, a bit of a rhythm that establishes itself, in which you have the dream world that you'll be going through, then you'll go through additional slumbers as you try to slowly make your way to a dream, and then you will finally have the dream, the core, the meat of the experience. Rinse and repeat as you slowly but surely unlock the story, the narrative being presented here, and that effectively is what Etherfields is. Along the way, you have deck building in terms of slowly but surely building and managing your deck, developing it as you progress through the game. A lot of puzzles that have presented itself, semi-escape room, semi-narrative, just a bunch of sequences in the dreams that will be slightly different in the way they mix it up every single time. And then that, basically, in a nutshell, is Etherfields. A lot of complexity in this system. And I'll jump straight into the things that I don't like, because they have been said time and time again by both those who liked the game and those that didn't. To begin with, this board. The board is, well, conspicuously absent from my setup over here because the board is a mess. The board is practically not functional for anyone who is remotely trying to engage in solo play. I can't comment on whether it works for 3 or 4 players because, well, I haven't played it with 3 or 4 players. But theoretically, if you have one person at the other end of the table, they could manage things, but then you'd be left without being able to see the cards, which feels like it would be lacking either way you played it. But the board is a complete mess in this game, which is why I am not playing with a board. The game doesn't need a board at all. The game perfectly fits on a relatively small space over here, with my dreamscape over here, my actual dream sequence going on over here, a few of my slumber cards and my dream map tiles over there, my fate deck, my turn deck, my individual character over here, and then my little handy dandy additional cards and rules and wisdom sheet over here. Everything fits in this very small space, and it doesn't need a board, and it doesn't have a lack for it. The rules for this game, the rules are, well, I can't say exactly just how bad the rules are, because honestly I heard how bad the rules were before I even dived into it, to the point that I started my experience in Etherfields with this handy dandy printed out 4-page manual by, I can't remember the username, but whoever you are, thank you. This helped extensively in terms of being able to dive down, and even that was still confusing, because Etherfields is trying to teach you a core structure around a game that you don't even understand what you're diving into until you play it. And so having that 4 pages that you don't understand is significantly better than having 18 pages that you don't understand. And so the rules, the presentation, the ability to dive into Etherfields, it's strongly lacking. It's a huge barrier to entry into this game, a barrier to entry I was only willing to overcome because I heard how good the game was, even as I heard how bad the rules were. In terms of the gameplay, once you actually have it up and running, the rules, I haven't found them that bad myself. There are certainly times you'll have to make a judgment call. There are certainly times you'll look at a card and be like, well, I'm not entirely sure how this works with that, and I just play it out, because to me, Etherfields is about the journey. It's not about a competitive head-to-head experience where I have to ensure that we're both playing strategically and optimally or whatever. I just want to have fun and keep exploring the dream. And so while there are occasional rules issues even once I am involved in Etherfields, I'm now 5-6 dreams into this experience and there still will be the occasional question. It's not nearly as bad or as off-putting as the initial barrier to entry that the game presents. The slumbers. The slumbers is something that has been talked about as well, and it's something that I additionally do not like. Because like I said already, the game has a sequence of you awaken in your whole dreamscape over here, and then you proceed to have additional slow slumbers as you build up towards the actual dream you're engaging in. And the slumbers exist to bring something fascinating to this world, and it really is incredible, because even as I don't like the slumbers, even as I have taken to mostly skipping these slumbers to get back into that next dream, I still occasionally dive into it, because the slumbers, what they do, one of the things they do that is fascinating, is they incorporate the dream sequences you're having one at a time, adding cards to your slumbers so you have these remnants of past memories, remnants of experiences you've had, as well as experiences you've just missed. And they add that to the deck, presenting a slightly different narrative as you go through these slumbers again and again before the dream. And I appreciate that enough that I'm willing to dive into it here and there to see what else has been added to a slumber. But I'm just not willing to go through it again and again to get to the next dream. The slumbers, I would say by the time I got to my third dream, I realized that I didn't like this cycle that Etherfields was giving me. I didn't like this cycle of going through slumbers again and again in order to get to the meat of the story, in order to get to the parts that I liked. And so I basically started skipping them. I set myself a rule that I allow myself one slumber sequence per session of Etherfields. I might go through 2 dreams and only 1 slumber session. I still want to maintain that aspect of what the game has given me to a small degree, but I certainly don't want it to turn into a mindless grind where I resent this game. And those slumbers, more than anything else that I have said or will say about the game, are my biggest personal complaint with Etherfields. That idea of having a repetitive sequence that doesn't continuously add to the experience, but rather bogs down and prevents the experience from happening. And there are a few other repetitive sequences like the slumbers, not nearly as bad. Aspects like the train station. There's going to be this train station you'll unlock throughout the game that also has this repetitiveness attached to it, to the point that they gave you these item cards that allow you to skip the repetitive sequence. They basically put a blocker, a tedious step in front of you and said, and you can occasionally earn the ticket to avoid that entirely, which isn't frankly as rewarding as it might sound. And then if your character dies and you have to repeat a dream, that can be frustrating. For me personally, it really hasn't been that much of a factor. I enjoy the dreams, I enjoy the discovery, and the way I have gone through these dream sequences is not one in which I try to explore every nook and cranny. So when I go through something again, which, well, has only happened once so far, it's not punishing as much as it is interesting to try to figure out, I didn't look behind that door this time. I didn't go through the pipes last time, I went through the other thing. The dream sequences allow so much discovery within them that resetting one hasn't been that frustrating to me. It's just been another avenue to explore. The game is a drop puzzly, but it's a little bit more narrative pushed than decision making. What I mean by that is there are so many aspects of Etherfields in which you're trying to walk down a hallway, explore this, look at that, pick up that, and engage in all the different elements presented. And there are certainly times where I have seen that puzzle, that escape room aspect of the game presenting itself. I have seen that aspect where I look at a card and I'm like, you know what? I think that connects to that. And if I do this, that might happen. And then I flip through the logbook and I read it and I'm like, yes, I got it. I figured it out. And that does happen and it is rewarding. But I would say that might be 10-15% of the discoveries you have. I would say a vast majority of the things you look at, the things you touch, the things you choose to explore, the vast majority of them are just proceeding down a narrative sequence. A narrative sequence that I enjoy, to be clear. But at a certain point, it just becomes a book. At a certain point, it just becomes, why don't you pick up a great mystery novel or whatnot? Why are you playing this game? And so there's a little bit less of that puzzly aspect that I would like to see in this game. And then for my last 2 complaints, the miniatures, and this is one we've heard as well, the miniatures, for all the amazing, glorious miniatures that they have, and they do have amazing, glorious miniatures, at the end of the day, these things are mostly completely unnecessary. The core box, to their credit, Awakened Realms in the core box of this game did an amazing job of giving you exactly what you need. They gave you the core minis for your characters, and then a handful of random placement characters that you could use for whenever you encounter something. And then tokens for those occasional other times. And then they sold a box full of amazing miniatures, absolutely amazing miniatures, but ones that you don't need. You'll occasionally put it down in a map square, and then proceed to deal with it for a few minutes, and then go back to the next sequence. They barely have a place. So much of this game is about what drives down, what stays in your memory. And these minis, unfortunately, do not stay in my memory. In fact, I would argue the one thing that does stay in my memory is one particular dream sequence in which I took out this guy. Gigantic guy compared to my tiny little guy. It was intimidating, it was scary, and he sat there on his card and he never even entered the dream sequence. The way that dream sequence played out, I happened to not have him enter at all, and so that fear, that threat, that aspect, the intimidation of feeling chased by this gigantic monstrous creature, it never even materialized that one time that I got the gigantic monstrous creature on the board. And then lastly, the last complaint is going to be the deck building in this game I don't find as rewarding as I would like. And I love deck building, don't get me wrong. Deck building is one of my favorite mechanics in games, and yet in this game, you start with a core deck, and you have a few opportunities to expand it, but I never is the wrong word. I'm roughly 10 hours into the experience, but in 5 or 6 dreams, I have yet to truly feel that I am building a deck customized around my character, so much as I am occasionally getting access to cards, occasionally cards that I can afford, and then adding them to my deck where they have an occasional presence in that deck. And so the deck building in this game, which could have been immensely rewarding and immensely satisfying, just isn't. And I think a big part of that is going to be because the dreams in this game are so varied, and because of the way they present such different experiences, it's hard to really truly give people cards that have such a unique identity because they have to adapt to every single thing this game throws at you. And that's basically everything I don't like about Etherfields. And yet, it's staying in my collection, like I said already. And yet I look forward to every single dream that I continue to play. And I think that Etherfields is simultaneously a bit of a train wreck in some things that didn't have to be train wrecks, and yet is still a game that I heavily recommend adding to your collection as long as you are comfortable knowing and understanding that you're going to have to get through rules that are difficult, and that I would recommend skipping a lot of the slumber sequences. What I would say is play by the rules in the slumber sequences until you realize that you may not want to, at which point reconsider. But start with it, go with it, see if it works for you. And that's because Etherfields is simultaneously, like I said, a train wreck in some elements and a masterpiece in others. The narrative aspects of this dream, the unique sequences, the unique experiences you have every single time. This game is multiple little escape rooms packed into a box. And they're all different and unique in the way they play out. Each one feels like a different experience. You have gardens with turning cards back and forth. You have narrative cards that you have to be slowly unlocking as you proceed deeper and darker, and then flipping and reorienting and trying to explore your way. You'll have darkness and you'll be chased by creatures, and that is one of the things. This game does so many amazing things differently. Experiences that I have never really had in other games, or at least not to this degree. From the cards that overlay your map tiles at random odd angles, and I don't even know if that was necessary, yet it feels odd, it feels mysterious, it feels eerie. From the way your experience augments your slumbers moving forward, that aspect that I touched upon already, where you have a dream, and then those things show up as memories, vague fragments of a past that you have not yet really learned to know yourself. The way that the explorative aspect of a 7th continent style game, but limited to a 4x3 grid in order to contain it so it doesn't overflow your table. It has that mystery, it has that adventure, and it is contained and manageable. Like I said, you don't even need the board that everyone is complaining about. The way you can peek at cards in this game, because whenever you start a dream, you have certain cards at your disposal, and then you have the opportunity, both from a basic core action as well as some cards you can unlock as the game progresses, in which you can peek at certain cards and take a look at them and see for 5 seconds what possibly is coming at you. And it's so fascinating to do that. It has this hauntingness of trying to figure out where the game is going next. And the way you're frequently and consistently, and again, this guy didn't really do it unfortunately, but the way you consistently feel pursued in every single one of these dream sequences. Whether there are creatures on the board you're dealing with, or whether they are off to the side and the mere threat of them is there. Every single dream sequence I have had, I have felt the crunch of time. I have felt that other things were trying to chase me, whether it's time itself, whether it's creatures, something was after me that I had to figure out how to get out of here before time ran out. Again, time itself or creatures. Etherfields does so many different things well, and it gives you those experiences in vastly different ways every single dream. Like I said already, the dreamscape I find tedious and boring. The slumbers I find to be getting in the way of what I am trying to enjoy here. But every time I unpack a new dream in Etherfields, every time I have set up a new experience, and every time I have started that experience, I have found it hard to stop. And the fact that I'm cheating by ignoring aspects of the game has not in any way diminished my experience here. It has not in any way diminished how much I enjoy this game. You see, Etherfields, like I said already, 5 to 6 streams, roughly 10 hours in, is a game that I keep enjoying, but I sometimes have to keep reminding myself that I enjoy it, and it usually happens at the end of a dream. At the end of a dream, I sit there and I'm like, okay, great, back to this part. Do I really want to continue playing this game? To a point where I think after my 4th dream, or maybe a 5th dream, at a certain point, I almost sat there and said, you know what, I might be done with this. This was fun, but it's time to move on. But then when I finally sat there and said, I'm done with the slumbers, I will only ever engage in this other aspect of the game when I choose to and when I want to, and I will ignore it when it's getting in my way. I will ignore the requirements for keys, I will ignore the whole aspect of anything here. I will simply grab a few cards, add it to my deck, and then move on to the next dream, skipping some core rules that get in the way of the enjoyment. From the moment I decided that, I have enjoyed every single play. Now, I still confine myself, worth mentioning from Shut Up and Sit Down's review, I still confine myself to the rules of the dream. If I die, I reset. Because I understand what their objection was. I understand that they had a problem with the idea that once you ignore the rules, then it loses its challenge. And so I choose to keep enough rules that isn't a problem for me. Etherfields is a game where the strategy and the story combined, it all mixes together for something that I heartily recommend. Heartily. I've used the word heartily before and people hear hardly. I highly recommend Etherfields. I highly recommend diving down into this experience. I am looking forward to finishing this core box. And I'm looking forward to all the stories they continuously provide. This is a narrative masterpiece in what it is doing. Do I sometimes feel a little more guided than anything else? Yes. Do I sometimes not understand or know how a consequence can shoot me back to before I began? 100%. Do I enjoy the process of flipping through that logbook to find out what happened next? Yes. Do I like trying to figure out where I should go and what aspect of the board I should try to touch? 100%. Do they always present a bit of a puzzle that does have a mechanical aspect to solving it as well? How to turn a tile, how to relocate a tile, when to discard one of your cards to dash forward 5 to run away from the pursuer, when to engage the creatures that are attacking you, when to run and flee and hide. Which other aspects of this dreamscape, of this land, can you try to figure out in order to actually get that journey completed? Yes. Yes to all of that. Etherfields is a game that will be staying in my collection, at least until I'm done with it. I have no interest in playing it again, I will say that. The aspect of replayability, which others have complained about as well, I do find the individual dreams replayable when I die, and there's so much of the story that I haven't touched upon because of the fact that I don't touch every single aspect of this board, of this dreamscape that I'm going through, because of the fact that I choose what to go with and then proceed. There are so many cards that are left unexplored. At the end of each scenario, I see a bunch of cards that I didn't get to touch or find or in any way engage with. And I'm frequently so curious what those are. And that does mean that there is an aspect of replayability to this game if you so choose. But for myself, I have enough games that I don't feel the need to dive back into Etherfields once I'm done with it. But rest assured, I will be going, or I plan on going through every single dream, and I plan on going through whatever other content comes out for this down the road. I have been enjoying my journey through this, to the story. I do pick and choose the aspects that I feel best give me that journey that I'm looking for. But with all that said, if you're comfortable with everything I said, then I'd still recommend picking up this game. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this slightly different review than my usual format, but that's because there's been enough critiques about Etherfields, and there's been enough of praise about Etherfields as well, and so I have the liberty to go in a slightly different direction than I normally do. It is what it is. Until next time, have a good one.